Temos como primeiro interlocutor Ariel Mascapac Hernandez, que eu apresento rapidamente. Hello, Ariel. Good afternoon. Ariel é pesquisador filipino-alemão do Instituto Alemão de Desenvolvimento e Sustentabilidade e professor associado da Universidade de Duisburg, Essen. Seus interesses de estudo incluem negociação, mediação, futuros sustentáveis, política climática e ambiental, justiça climática, normas de sustentabilidade, entre outros. E hoje ele vai nos brindar com uma intervenção onde se trata de buscar, de pensar o conceito de mediação transformativa para avançar na busca da sustentabilidade. De novo, seja bem-vindo, Ariel. A palavra é com você.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Even though I don't speak Portuguese, I understood almost everything. So I would then like to share my slides now. So I hope you can see it. So as in addition to what was said about me, so I have this special relationship with mediation because I'm also a trained mediation. So I did mediation work before I studied. Before I did my PhD, was helping the Philippine government negotiate with the Muslim rebel groups. And in this case, there were some cases where environmental or biodiversity issues were used to actually bring together the conflicting parties. So this is my entry point to this topic. So how I made this connection between environmental issues and negotiation and mediation. So for today's, before I start, I would like to give you some insights about my motivation. So why am I doing this research, this work? So in the past, I had the chance to do some field research and also interview and field research and I was looking at these trade-offs between sustainable transformation, and also other priorities such as biodiversity or energy security. And I saw some trade-offs between these priorities, and this is something that I found really interesting. And at the same time, I found it quite interesting how climate policies or sustainability policies are taken as it is. And there were cases where, for example, biomass energy was undermining biodiversity, or wind projects in Mexico that are responsible for the disenfranchising of indigenous communities, or even recently flood management programs in Jakarta that led to gentrification in these areas after the establishment of these infrastructures. So as you would see, so my research focuses on these trade-offs. And because of these trade-offs, I found some interesting insights or concepts from negotiations and mediation, and I am working on this to actually also move forward this discourse, not only in sustainable development, but also in negotiation or mediation studies. Okay, so as mediators, I mean, I would now use the mediator hat. So I was asking myself, so what are the current challenges in this connection between climate protection and biodiversity? And what are the challenges that mediation can help address? For example, in the discourse, I found the following questions that are really relevant. For example, so why should we care about these problems, about environmental degradation, about biodiversity loss? And so how can we persuade, for example, the Europeans or the Americans that they are also stakeholders to this, even though, for example, this biodiversity loss is happening in Brazil. So why should Americans or the Europeans care? And this question is something that is also emerging in the literature. And also another thing is that to ask ourselves, so how can we actually convince the others about the feasibility or the importance of specific solutions? It's not only that we care about the problem, but also how can we solve this problem? And then also looking at our own privileges, for example, as Europeans or Brazilians, and what are the privileges that we have, and how can we actually use these privileges to make a difference. And so these are just a selection of the questions that mediation can help address. Okay, as you would see, the sustainable transformation or sustainable transformation also encompasses many priorities like energy security, but also biodiversity. And in these cases, biodiversity loss is more or less connected to other global crises, for example, pandemic or the war or even inflation. And this interconnection between these global crises are making the resolution of this problem very difficult. And then, of course, a big question is how can we finance the solutions that we have, especially that we have this asymmetry between countries. Okay, and in my presentation today, I would like to give you some insights about the question. So how can mediation be transformative for it to support sustainable development? Okay, and I'm not sure if I have time. Then I would, if I would then have time, then I would like to discuss how mediation can help facilitate this transformation towards the sustainability with a focus on biodiversity. Okay, so probably we have different definition of mediation, and in my case, I'm trying to conceptualize mediation as a transformative aspect. So what is actually transformative mediation? And this is something that maybe we could discuss later. In my understanding, so mediation is in the context of sustainable development, a cooperative process of consensus building. So there is this consensus building, and the actors can be mediators or the stakeholders, and also those persons who can influence the process. They might not be direct stakeholders, but if they would be able to spoil or to support the process, then they are also considered actors. And the aim of mediation is to resolve issues, and these issues refer to common threats and common vulnerabilities. And this mediation is done through structures, and these structures can represent relational infrastructures that facilitate interactions and cooperation. So there are many infrastructures or many institutions that can actually facilitate cooperation and processes. For example, here I think of the ways carbon lock-ins can be eliminated and be replaced with sustainability lock-ins. And of course, we have the aim of achieving certain outcomes. And these outcomes, for example, refer to the materialization of visions and priorities through agreement, through consensus building. And at the same time, in some cases, non-agreement are also outcomes that can be beneficial for the whole process, for the whole transformation. Okay, so in my research, I was thinking, how can mediation be transformative? And one approach that I'm taking is to define mediation as transformative if it is helping creating resources for sustainable futures, both in research and practice. Here is just a selection, and this concept is still in its infancy, so it can be reduced or it can be expanded in the near future. So so mediation is transformative if it creates resources needed to establish these narratives for sustainable development. So these narratives refer to stories and the rhetoric needed for us to justify policy cycles, to justify policies, for example, for biodiversity, and also as orientation for decision makers. So in addition to that, mediation is transformative if it helps structure complexity. So as you know, biodiversity laws, climate protection, and the others are very complex. And if mediation is able to structure this complexity, then it is transformative. Another possibility is to see mediation as something that reduces contingency, reduces uncertainty. For example, if mediation is able to reduce decision dilemmas, negotiated agreement dilemma, where, for example, if you do not know the outcome of your decision, then you would probably say no. You would not agree merely because you don't know the outcome or how you would be affected by this outcome in the future. And mediation is also transformative if it helps us be resilient and if it helps us to learn from our mistakes. And with this resilience and learning, we are able to actually overcome shocks. And in transformation processes, we will have some disruptions. We will have some actors challenging the whole process. And through resilience and learning, we can actually overcome these shocks. And mediation should be able to contribute to this resilience. And in addition to that, mediation is transformative if it sets the normative guardrails. For example, there's some technical solutions that are more or less efficient. At the same time, they are not politically feasible. And mediation can help us actually find out these guardrails, normative guardrails, the values, for example, human rights or welfare that will actually guide our decisions or the decisions of decision makers. Okay. Okay, I would be just giving some examples of how mediation can help, for example, create narratives. Mediation, if you're a mediator and you bring together actors, and then and if you bring them together, you are already justifying the visions that they are creating. Because if there are some actors that are excluded, then there will be some challenges to this common vision at the end, especially when those who were excluded become more powerful at a later stage. So it is to our interest that everyone is included. And another example would be through mediation, we can reiterate the trade-offs, the negative externalities. For example, what does the achievement of climate goals mean for energy access? So mediation should be able to help us with that. Okay, and then with the structural complexity, mediation should help improve the consistency of policies and actions. For example, if one ministry is pursuing this act with the policies of the others, of the other ministries, and mediation should be able to help connect these ministries to look at this consistency. Okay, and also to improve the understanding of the interplays between sectors and policies. Okay, and yeah, I would not be looking at all these examples at the same time. If you would be interested, please contact me or download this. Many points that I wanted to share, but because of time, I would skip them. Okay, so for our discussion later, I would like to hear from you what you think about the concept of power and how it remains a huge challenge, for example, when connecting biodiversity priorities with climate protection. So how is it, for example, we have here the situation where climate policy is very popular among policymakers, and at the same time, biodiversity policies. So this asymmetry of power is also important on this, and also this non-linearity of transformation processes. For example, how do we see achievements in climate protection when they are actually undermining biodiversity? So how do we connect them together, and can we actually combine them in one pathway thinking? And then, of course, relevant would be questions on justice and fairness, especially if we have milestones, indicators, and targets. And these milestones and targets are more or less quantifiable, but issues related to justice and fairness are not. So in biodiversity and also climate protection, we usually have these milestones, but then of course we need to ask whether these milestones are capturing the essence of several justice and fairness issues. Then I would like to give the floor back to you. And in case you have some questions, please feel free to do so in your own language, in the language that you prefer. Thank you.